Rain hammered against the windshield like tiny shards of glass, blurring the morning into a gray chaos. Amelia Hart's trembling hands clutched the steering wheel as her old Honda coughed its last breath right in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Her shift at the cafe started 10 minutes ago, and for the third time this month she was late. She could already picture her manager's glare, the look of disappointment, and the sound of her name being called in that cold tone. "Amelia, my office, now." If only she knew that her lateness today, the same mistake that would cost her job, was going to save someone's life before the day was over. Before the story continues, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal if you believe that everyone deserves a second chance. Your support helps us spread stories of hope and compassion. By the time Amelia reached Harper's Cafe, her shoes were soaked, her coat clung to her like a second skin, and her heart felt heavier than the rain. Her manager, Sylvia, stood behind the counter with crossed arms, her red lipstick pressed into a thin line. The morning crowd buzzed around them, coffee machines humming, customers chatting, and the smell of roasted beans filling the air. But for Amelia, everything slowed. "Amelia, this is the third time this month," Sylvia said, her tone low but sharp. "We talked about this. I can't keep doing this. I know. I'm so sorry," Amelia pleaded, water dripping from her hair onto the floor. "My car broke down again, and the bus." Sylvia raised a hand. "I'm sorry, Amelia, but I have to let you go." The words sliced through her chest like ice. Fired. The job she had fought so hard to keep. The one that paid for her mother's medication, her little brother's school lunches, gone in a single breath. She tried to speak, but her throat burned, and before she knew it, she was out the door, standing in the rain again, jobless, heartbroken, and defeated. She wandered aimlessly through the streets, her eyes stinging, not just from the cold, but from the ache of being constantly behind, constantly failing no matter how hard she tried. She ended up at the park across the street, where she often sat during her lunch breaks. Today it felt emptier, lonelier. She sat on a bench beneath an old oak tree, pulling her knees close. Around her the city moved on, horns blaring, people rushing, life continuing as if her world hadn't just collapsed. And that's when she noticed him. A man in a dark gray suit stood on the bridge overlooking the park's pond. He wasn't moving, just standing there with his back to the world, one hand gripping the railing tightly. Something about the stillness of his body felt wrong, too still, too final. Amelia's heart skipped. The rain blurred her vision as she squinted toward him. The man took off his jacket, laid it neatly on the railing, and placed something, his watch, beside it. Her pulse raced. Without thinking, she stood up and called out, "Hey, are you okay?" No answer. She started running, her wet sneakers slapping against the pavement, her breath coming out in sharp bursts. "Sir, wait!" she shouted, her voice trembling. When she reached him, she saw the tears streaming down his face, blending with the rain. He didn't turn around. "Please," he whispered, voice barely audible, "just go." Amelia froze for a moment. She could feel the weight of his pain in the air. Then, with a trembling voice, she said softly, "No, I'm not going anywhere." He finally turned toward her, a man in his early 40s maybe, with tired eyes and a face that looked like it had carried too much sorrow for too long. "It's not worth it," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know what you're going through, but whatever it is, it doesn't have to end here." He looked down at the water below and murmured, "You wouldn't understand. I lost everything. My company, my wife, my son won't even talk to me. There's nothing left." Amelia's lips quivered. "You're wrong," she said, tears mixing with the rain. "You're still here. That means there's something left. You just can't see it right now." The man let out a broken laugh. "Why do you even care? You don't know me." "Because," she said, stepping closer, "I know what it feels like to think you don't matter. I just lost my job because I was late. I'm scared. I feel useless. but if I can still stand here, so can you. Please, don't do this." For a long moment, silence filled the air between them, broken only by the sound of raindrops hitting the water below. Then the man's knees buckled. He broke down, sobbing into his hands. Amelia gently placed her hand on his shoulder, holding him as he wept. They stood there for a long time, two broken souls clinging to each other in the storm. When the man finally looked up, there was a faint glimmer of life in his eyes again. "My name's Ethan," he said, his voice raw. "Amelia," she replied, softly smiling through her tears. Ethan nodded slowly. "You saved my life today." She shook her head. "No, you just needed someone to remind you that it's not over." A few hours later, after the rain had eased, Ethan insisted on walking her to a nearby cafe. They sat together, warming their hands around steaming mugs of coffee. He asked her about her life, her family, and when she mentioned she'd just been fired that morning, his expression shifted. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "You don't deserve that," Amelia shrugged. "It's okay. I'll figure something out. I always do." He smiled faintly. "You remind me of someone I used to know. Someone who never gave up, no matter how hard life got." Before leaving, Ethan handed her his business card. "If you ever need anything, call me, please." She glanced at the card, barely registering it, and tucked it into her coat pocket before they parted ways. Days passed. Amelia tried applying for new jobs, but rejection after rejection came. Her savings ran low. Her mother's medicine was nearly finished, and she felt herself slipping again. One night, as she sat by the kitchen table, she pulled out the business card. It read, "Ethan Maxwell, CEO, Maxwell Enterprises." Her heart stopped. Ethan, the man she'd found on the bridge, was that Ethan Maxwell, the billionaire tech mogul who'd disappeared from the public eye after his company's stock crashed months ago. She hesitated but finally dialed the number. The next morning she was invited to his office. When she entered, Ethan stood by the window, looking healthier, calmer. He smiled when he saw her. "Amelia, I was hoping you'd call." She smiled nervously. "I didn't want to bother you. I didn't know what else to do." He gestured for her to sit. "You didn't bother me. You saved me, and I want to return the favor." He handed her a folder. Inside was a job offer: executive assistant, Maxwell Enterprises. Amelia's eyes widened. "Ethan, I can't accept this." "Yes, you can," he said firmly. "I need someone around me who sees people for who they are, not what they have. And I trust you more than anyone." Tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted to say something, but her voice broke before words could form. Ethan simply smiled and added softly, "Sometimes being late doesn't mean being behind. It means being right on time for something greater." From that day forward, Amelia worked at Maxwell Enterprises, not just as an employee, but as the reason a man got a second chance at life. Under her guidance and Ethan's renewed leadership, the company rose again, stronger, humbler, kinder. And every time she saw the clock tick past her old shift time at the cafe, she smiled, remembering that the very moment that seemed like failure had turned into the start of something beautiful. Months later, during a company charity event, Ethan stood on stage, telling the story of how a stranger saved him from himself. When he said her name, the audience turned toward Amelia, clapping and cheering. But she didn't see herself as a hero, just someone who showed up, even when the world told her she was too late. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Every click helps us share more real, emotional stories that remind the world that kindness can change everything. Special request: comment right on time. If you believe everything happens for a reason. And so, what began as the worst day of Amelia's life became the day that changed not only her fate, but another person's life forever. because sometimes being late isn't a mistake. It's destiny's perfect timing.